My name is Emma Johnson, and at 28 years old, I was 5 days away from marrying the love of my life, James Montgomery. Everything seemed perfect until his old money mother delivered the most humiliating lecture of my life about knowing my place in their family. What she didn't know was that behind my modest exterior lay $13 million, a successful chain of boutique hotels, and the determination to never let anyone look down on me again. Her smug expression was about to meet the reality check of a lifetime. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you love stories about people who refuse to be underestimated, hit that like button and subscribe for this journey of how I wiped that condescending smile right off her face. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Denver where my parents both worked double shifts, my mother as a nurse and my father as a mechanic. We lived paycheck to paycheck, but they instilled in me the values of hard work, education, and never giving up on your dreams. Every penny of my college tuition came from scholarships I earned through relentless studying and part-time jobs that left me exhausted but determined. I graduated summa cum laude from the University of Colorado with a degree in hospitality management, and immediately threw myself into the hotel industry with fierce ambition. My grandmother had always been my biggest supporter, cheering me on through every challenge. When she passed away during my final semester, she left me something that would change my life forever. Her unassuming lifestyle had hidden decades of smart real estate investments and careful saving. The $8 million inheritance she left me was shocking. No one, not even my parents, had realized the extent of her wealth. She had lived in the same modest house for 50 years, drove the same car for 20, and never once flaunted what she had built. I used a portion of that money to purchase my first small hotel in downtown Denver. Within 3 years, I had expanded to 5 boutique properties across Colorado, each one carefully restored and uniquely designed. My business was thriving, adding another $5 million to my net worth by the time I was 27. But I kept this success largely private. I drove a reliable Honda, lived in a nice but unremarkable apartment, and dressed well without being flashy. I wanted to be valued for who I was as a person, not what was in my bank account. Only my parents, my best friend Sarah, and my accountant knew the full extent of my wealth. I met James at a charity auction for children's literacy. My hotel company had donated a weekend package, and I was there representing the business. James was attending because the Montgomery family always supported educational causes, or at least they always made appearances at the right events. He caught my attention immediately. Unlike the other trust fund kids in attendance, he seemed genuinely passionate about the cause. Our conversation flowed from books we loved to travel adventures we dreamed of taking. When he asked for my number, I gave it without hesitation, even though I recognized his last name from the society pages. A Montgomery family was Boston blue blood with roots tracing back to the Mayflower. Their investment firm, Montgomery & Associates, managed portfolios for half the wealthy families on the East Coast. James had moved to Denver to open a West Coast branch, which is how we'd ended up in the same city. Our first date was a hike in the Rocky Mountains, where James packed a picnic lunch and admitted he'd looked up my hotels online and was impressed by the reviews. That was James, thoughtful and genuine despite his privileged upbringing. We were inseparable after that first day together. Weekend camping trips, cooking experiments in my kitchen, deep conversations that lasted until sunrise, and a connection that made everything else fade into the background. He never flaunted his wealth, and I never revealed mine. It seemed irrelevant compared to what we were building together. He loved that I was passionate about my work and completely independent. I loved that despite growing up with every advantage, he had developed genuine empathy and a strong work ethic. When he took me to Boston to meet his parents after 8 months of dating, I got my first real glimpse of what I was walking into. The Montgomery estate in Beacon Hill was a monument to old money, a 4-story brownstone that had been in the family for 6 generations, filled with antiques and oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors. Charles and Vivian Montgomery were polite but coolly evaluating during that first visit. Vivian particularly had perfected the art of the backhanded compliment. "How lovely that you found success with your little hotels," she said over dinner. "Such a charming business for a young woman. And your parents must be so proud. Working-class families always value entrepreneurship, don't they?" Charles was more direct in his dismissiveness, discussing investment strategies and family business matters that excluded me entirely from the conversation. James either didn't notice these slights or chose to ignore them, probably accustomed to navigating his mother's subtle cruelty. Still, I was deeply in love, and these seemed like minor obstacles compared to the joy James brought to my life. When he proposed during a sunset hike on our 1-year anniversary, presenting me with his grandmother's Art Deco diamond ring, I said yes without hesitation. Wedding planning began as a dream, but slowly revealed more cracks in the foundation. Vivian had opinions about everything and made it clear that the Montgomery family would handle arrangements because, clearly, dear, your family's budget wouldn't accommodate the type of wedding befitting James's position. Rather than correct this assumption, I let them believe what they wanted. I had my reasons for keeping my financial situation private, and part of me was curious to see how they could treat someone they perceived as beneath their social status. When Vivian insisted on adding 75 of their family friends to the guest list, I agreed. When she dismissed my choice of flowers as quaint and ordered elaborate arrangements from Boston's most exclusive florist, I let it go. When she suggested I might want to reconsider my dress choice for something more appropriate to the family's standing, I politely declined. That was where I drew the line. As the wedding approached, I felt increasingly like a visitor at my own engagement party. But I consoled myself, knowing that once James and I were married, we'd build our own life in Denver, far from his mother's daily influence. 3 days before the wedding, everything seemed to be falling into place. The venue in Denver was prepared, flowers arranged, catering finalized. I had just finished a final walkthrough when I received a call from Vivian asking me to lunch the next day. James would be in meetings all afternoon, she explained, and she thought it would be nice for us to have some quality time together before the wedding festivities began. Looking back, I should have recognized the predatory sweetness in her voice. But I was operating on minimal sleep and maximum stress, and all I heard was an opportunity to perhaps finally connect with my future mother-in-law. I had no idea I was walking into an ambush that would test not just my patience, but the very foundation of my relationship with James and his family. The Montgomery estate looked even more intimidating in the bright Colorado sunlight. They had flown in for the wedding and were staying at the most exclusive hotel in downtown Denver. Vivian had chosen the hotel's private dining room for our lunch, a space that reeked of old money and exclusivity. When I arrived, Vivian was already seated, dressed in a Chanel suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her jewelry was understated but obviously expensive, the kind of pieces that whisper wealth rather than scream it. "Emma, darling," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Thank you for making time in your busy schedule." I sat across from her, suddenly feeling underdressed in my simple black dress, despite its quality. The silence stretched uncomfortably before she spoke again. "I wanted to have this conversation before tomorrow's rehearsal," she began, setting down her water glass with deliberate precision. "There are some things about marrying into the Montgomery family that I think you should understand." My stomach tightened. "What kind of things?" "Expectations," she said simply. "Standards that have been maintained for generations. The Montgomery name carries significant weight in certain circles, and that comes with responsibilities." I waited for her to continue, sensing this was building to something bigger. "James loves you deeply," she continued, "but love isn't always enough to bridge certain gaps. Social gaps, cultural gaps, financial gaps." There it was. "I'm not sure I understand what you're suggesting." Vivian leaned forward slightly, her voice taking on a tone of false concern. "Emma, dear, I've done some research into your background. Your parents are lovely people, I'm sure, but they work service jobs. You run a few small hotels in a secondary market. It's admirable, truly, but it's not substantial. The condescension was unmistakable now. My business is actually quite successful, I said carefully. She waved her hand dismissively. I'm sure it provides a comfortable living for someone of your background. But you must understand the scale we're discussing. The Montgomery family manages assets in the hundreds of millions. Our social obligations alone cost more annually than most people's entire net worth. I felt heat rising in my face, but forced myself to remain composed. What exactly are you asking of me? I'm asking you to consider whether you're truly prepared for this life, she said, her voice dripping with false kindness. The charity boards, the social expectations, the financial pressures. James has been sheltered from many of these realities, but as his wife, you would be expected to participate fully. She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering what I now realize was her intended killing blow. Perhaps it would be kinder to James and to yourself to acknowledge that some bridges are simply too wide to cross. He could find someone more suitable to his position, and you could find happiness with someone from your own background, someone who wouldn't make you feel inadequate every single day. The words hung in the air between us like poison. In her mind, she was being generous, giving me an out before I embarrassed myself and her son. She expected me to crumble, to thank her for her honesty, and to quietly disappear from James's life. Instead, I set my napkin down carefully and looked her directly in the eyes. Mrs. Montgomery, I think there's something you should know about my little hotels and my modest background. Something in my tone must have alerted her that this wasn't going according to her script. Her perfectly composed expression faltered slightly. My grandmother left me an inheritance, I continued, my voice steady and clear. $8 million from decades of smart real estate investments. I used that money to build a boutique hotel empire that's now worth an additional $5 million. My personal net worth is approximately $13 million. The shock that registered on her face was everything I had imagined and more. Her mouth actually fell open slightly before she recovered her composure. Furthermore, I continued, gaining momentum. I chose to keep this information private, not out of shame, but because I wanted to be valued for who I am as a person, not what's in my bank account, something your family seems incapable of understanding. Vivian's face had gone pale, then flushed red as the implications sank in. That's not possible, she stammered. You drive a Honda. You live in a rental apartment. I drive a reliable car because I value practicality over status symbols, I replied evenly. I live modestly because ostentation isn't appealing to me. These are conscious choices made by someone who built their wealth through hard work and smart decisions, not inheritance and family connections. She was struggling to recalibrate, her worldview shifting beneath her feet. Why didn't you tell us? Why keep this secret? Because I wanted to see how you would treat someone you perceive as beneath you, I said bluntly. And you've shown me exactly who you are. The question now is whether you can accept who I actually am. The silence stretched between us as she processed this reversal of power. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost all its condescending sweetness. This changes things considerably, she admitted reluctantly. Does it? I challenged. Does my net worth suddenly make me more worthy of respect? Because if that's the case, it says far more about your character than mine. She had no answer for that. I stood up, gathering my purse. I'm going to marry your son in 4 days, Mrs. Montgomery. I'm going to love him, support him, and build a life with him as his equal partner. Whether you choose to be part of that life with respect and acceptance, or continue your campaign of subtle cruelty, is entirely up to you. But I will no longer tolerate being treated as less than I am. I left her sitting there, mouth agape, probably for the first time in her privileged life, at a complete loss for words. The drive back to my hotel was empowering rather than emotional. I felt lighter, as if a weight I'd been carrying for months had finally been lifted. I called Sarah immediately. You actually told her? Sarah's voice was full of admiration. How did she react? Like someone who just discovered the world isn't flat. I replied, unable to suppress a smile. I think I may have broken Vivian Montgomery. That evening, James called in a panic. Emma, what happened with my mother today? She's been locked in her room all afternoon, and when I asked about your lunch, she just said we needed to have a serious conversation. How wealthy? He asked quietly. $13 million wealthy. Another long pause. 13 million. Emma, why didn't you tell me? For the same reason you don't introduce yourself as James Montgomery of the Boston Montgomerys to everyone you meet, I explained. I wanted to be lost for who I am, not what I have. But you let my family treat you like, he trailed off, the full implications dawning on him. Like someone beneath their notice? Yes, because I wanted to see their true character, and now I have. The next morning, I received a call from Charles Montgomery. His tone was entirely different from our previous interactions. Respectful, almost deferential. Emma, I believe we owe you an apology, he said without preamble. Vivian explained yesterday's conversation, and I'm mortified by our family's behavior. Mr. Montgomery, I appreciate the call, but the issue isn't my net worth. It's the way your family treats people you perceive as having less than you do. You're absolutely right, he acknowledged, and we'd like the opportunity to make amends. Would you and James join us for dinner tonight? We'd very much like to start over. I agreed, curious to see whether the Montgomery family was capable of genuine change or if this was simply damage control. The dinner was a revelation. Charles and Vivian were completely different people, warm, engaging, asking thoughtful questions about my business, and treating me as an equal. Vivian actually apologized directly, admitting that she had made assumptions based on superficial observations and had behaved poorly. I was trying to protect James, she said, her voice sincere for the first time since I'd known her. But I realize now that I was the one putting him in danger, of losing a remarkable woman who loves him for exactly who he is. The wedding 2 days later was everything I had dreamed of. Vivian and Charles hosted a beautiful rehearsal dinner where they publicly welcomed me to the family, acknowledging my business success and expressing their excitement about having me as a daughter-in-law. During her toast, Vivian said something that surprised everyone. Emma has taught our family an important lesson about assumptions and appearances. We're better people for knowing her, and James is the luckiest man alive to have earned her love. The ceremony itself was perfect. James's eyes filled with tears when he saw me walking down the aisle, and our vows carried extra meaning after everything we'd navigated together. At the reception, I was no longer treated as an outsider, but as family, with guests approaching me to discuss business opportunities and investment strategies. Our honeymoon in Italy was a blissful escape where we could finally talk openly about everything: my wealth, his family dynamics, and our plans for the future. James admitted he was relieved to know about my financial success because it meant our relationship was truly built on mutual love and respect rather than any kind of dependency. 6 months later, those conversations proved crucial when Vivian began suggesting we should move to Boston to be closer to family. Once-a-month visits, James told her firmly. Emma has built something remarkable in Denver, and we're not abandoning it for geographical convenience. To my surprise, Vivian accepted this boundary gracefully. Perhaps she had genuinely learned from our confrontation, or perhaps she simply recognized that the power dynamics had permanently shifted. Charles showed his evolved thinking in more concrete ways, inviting me to consult on some of the farm's hospitality sector investments and actually implementing my recommendations. When my hotel chain was featured in a major business magazine, he sent a congratulations note that was both personal and proud. Most importantly, James and I established our own life rhythm, independent of Montgomery expectations. We bought a beautiful home in Denver that we chose together, made financial decisions as partners, and built traditions that reflected both our backgrounds without favoring either family's preferences. The clash with Vivian that had threatened to derail our wedding ultimately strengthened our foundation. It forced us to have conversations about values, expectations, and boundaries that might have taken years to surface otherwise. Those difficult days of conflict and revelation prepared us for marriage in ways that smooth sailing never could have. I learned that hiding significant parts of yourself, even with good intentions, can create more problems than it solves. James learned to prioritize our partnership over family pressure when the two came into conflict. Together, we discovered that respect must be earned and demanded, regardless of family dynamics or social expectations. The Montgomery family's initial reaction to my perceived lack of wealth revealed everything I needed to know about their character. When they discovered my actual financial situation, they were forced to confront their own prejudices and assumptions. Some people might have been satisfied with their changed behavior once my wealth was revealed, but I wanted them to understand that respect should never be contingent on net worth. Marriage, I've learned, isn't just the union of two people, but the intersection of two family systems, two approaches to everything from money to social status to personal values. Finding harmony requires constant communication, mutual respect, and the courage to stand firm on core principles while remaining flexible on lesser issues. When faced with Vivian's cruel suggestion that I walk away from James for his own good, I could have retreated in hurt and shame. Instead, I chose to reveal the truth about who I really was, not just my financial worth, but my strength, my principles, and my refusal to be diminished by anyone. That choice established the foundation for our marriage and my place within the Montgomery family, not as an outsider to be tolerated, but as an equal contributor to be respected and valued. Looking back, I'm grateful for Vivian's attempt to humiliate me. It gave me the opportunity to show exactly who Emma Johnson really is, a woman who built her own fortune, demands her own respect, and never backs down from a challenge. Have you ever had to prove your worth to people who underestimated you? Have you revealed your true strength and silenced the doubters? Share your story in the comments below. If this tale of standing up to condescension and claiming your rightful place resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe for more stories of triumph over prejudice, and share with someone who needs encouragement to show their true worth. That choice established the foundation for our marriage and my place within the Montgomery family. Not as an outsider to be tolerated, but as an equal contributor to be respected and valued. A year later, my hotel empire had expanded to 12 properties across 3 states. James joined me as a business partner, bringing his financial expertise to help scale our operations. We were featured together on the cover of Hospitality Business magazine as the power couple redefining luxury travel. Vivian framed the article and hung it prominently in her Boston home. But the real victory wasn't in the magazine coverage or even in Vivian's complete transformation from adversary to ally. It was in the example we set for other couples facing similar family pressures. I started receiving messages from women who had watched my story and found the courage to stand up to their own dismissive in-laws. One letter particularly moved me. A young woman named Maria wrote that after seeing how I handled the Montgomery family, she finally revealed her successful tech startup to her boyfriend's parents, who had been treating her like a gold digger. Her revelation led to not only respect, but an investment opportunity that helped her business expand internationally. Another message came from a man whose wife's family had been patronizing him for years about his blue-collar background. He finally told them about the construction company he'd built from nothing, which now employed over 200 people. The family's attitude shifted overnight, and more importantly, his wife gained new respect for the strength it had taken him to remain humble despite his success. These stories reminded me that sometimes our individual acts of courage ripple outward in ways we never expect. By refusing to be diminished, we give others permission to stand tall as well. The wedding industry magazine that featured our story received so many requests for interviews about wealth revelation weddings that they created an entire series about couples who had hidden their financial success only to reveal it when challenged by disapproving families. Apparently, our situation was more common than I had realized. What shocked me most was discovering how many successful entrepreneurs, particularly women, had been hiding their wealth from their partners' families for similar reasons. The magazine series uncovered dozens of stories. A tech executive who let her boyfriend's parents think she was just a computer programmer, while she was actually the CTO of a billion-dollar startup. A real estate mogul who allowed her in-laws to believe she sold houses, rather than owned a portfolio worth $50 million. Even a best-selling novelist who pretended to be a struggling writer to avoid the complications that came with literary fame and fortune. The common thread was always the same: successful people choosing invisibility over the judgment, expectations, and change dynamics that often accompany known wealth. But also, like me, they eventually reached a breaking point where hiding became more damaging than revealing. One story particularly resonated with me. Sarah Chen, a biotech entrepreneur from Seattle, had built a company that developed life-saving cancer treatments. Worth over $20 million, she had been dating a doctor whose family constantly made jokes about gold diggers in his presence, clearly directing the comments at her. They assumed she was a low-level lab technician trying to marry above her station. A breaking point came when his mother actually asked her to sign a waiver stating she wouldn't pursue alimony if the marriage failed. Sarah's response was to invite the entire family to the FDA approval ceremony for her company's breakthrough cancer drug, where she was recognized as the lead scientist and CEO. The mother's face when she realized she had been condescending to someone whose work was literally saving lives became a viral moment in biotech circles. Another woman, Jennifer Rodriguez, had inherited a chain of successful restaurants from her grandmother, but worked as a server in one location to stay connected to the business from the ground up. Her boyfriend's wealthy family mocked her waitressing job for months, even suggesting she find more respectable work if she wanted to fit into their social circle. Jennifer's revelation came during a family dinner at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, which happened to be one of hers. When the father complained about the service and demanded to speak to the owner, Jennifer calmly stood up and said, "You already are." The silence that followed was described by witnesses as deafening. These stories taught me that my experience with the Montgomerys was part of a larger cultural phenomenon. In a society obsessed with wealth and status, many successful people choose to hide their achievements to experience authentic relationships. But this choice often backfires when families reveal their true character through their treatment of perceived lessers. The magazine series became so popular that it spawned a documentary called Hidden Fortunes. When success stays secret, James and I were interviewed extensively for the film, sharing not just our story, but the lessons we learned about family dynamics, authentic relationships, and the courage required to demand respect. During filming, the director asked me a question that I've thought about many times since. Do you think the Montgomerys would have treated you differently if they had known about your wealth from the beginning? My answer was immediate. Absolutely. But that different treatment wouldn't have been respect. It would have been calculation. They would have seen me as an asset rather than a person. The condescension would have been replaced by manipulation, which isn't an improvement. This distinction became central to my speaking engagements. True respect isn't conditional on net worth, social status, or family background. When people only treat you well after discovering your wealth, they're not respecting you, they're respecting your bank account. The challenge is distinguishing between people who will value you regardless of your financial situation, and those who will only see your worth in dollar signs. The documentary's release led to something I hadn't expected: a flood of speaking requests from business schools, women's organizations, and even family therapy conferences. Apparently, my story had struck a nerve with people across multiple demographics who were struggling with similar issues of authenticity, family dynamics, and self-worth. One of my most memorable speaking engagements was at Harvard Business School, where I addressed a room full of MBA students who were about to enter careers that would likely make them wealthy. Many of them were already grappling with how to navigate family relationships when their earning potential exceeded their parents' or partners' families. The question isn't whether to reveal your success, I told them. It's whether you're prepared to handle the reactions that revelation will bring. Some people will love you more for your money. Others will love you less. The people worth keeping in your life will love you the same. A student raised her hand. But what if keeping your wealth secret feels like lying to people you care about? It was the same question I had wrestled with regarding James. There's a difference between privacy and deception, I explained. I wasn't lying about who I was. I was protecting myself from being valued for the wrong reasons. The key is knowing when that protection is helping you form authentic relationships and when it's preventing them. Another student, a young man from a working-class background, asked, "How do you handle the guilt that comes with hiding advantages from family members who are struggling financially?" That question hit close to home. While my parents weren't struggling, I knew many successful people who grappled with survivor's guilt when they achieved financial success that exceeded their family circumstances. Guilt about success is natural, but not productive, I responded. The best way to honor your background is to use your success responsibly, to help others when appropriate, but not to diminish yourself out of guilt. Your achievements don't diminish your family's worth, and their struggles don't diminish your right to success. E-speaking engagements led to consulting opportunities with companies dealing with similar dynamics in their corporate cultures. I worked with several firms where successful employees were downplaying their achievements to avoid triggering resentment from colleagues or supervisors. The parallels to family dynamics were striking. One tech company brought me in because they had noticed that their most successful female engineers were avoiding promotions or refusing to discuss their compensation with their teams. The company wanted to understand why high achievers were hiding their success and what impact this was having on company culture. Through interviews with employees, I discovered that many women had experienced backlash when their success became visible. Being labeled as aggressive or lucky rather than skilled. They had learned that flying under the radar was safer than celebrating achievements. Sound familiar? My recommendation was a complete overhaul of how the company recognized and discussed success. Instead of individual achievements being seen as threats to team dynamics, they needed to be reframed as inspiration and evidence of what was possible. This required training managers to celebrate success without creating competition, and helping employees understand that a colleague's achievement wasn't a judgment on their own worth. The results were remarkable. Within 6 months, the company saw increased productivity, higher employee satisfaction, and more women accepting leadership roles. Success was no longer something to hide, but something to aspire to and support in others. This corporate work led to my second book, The Visibility Paradox: Why Success Hides and How to Help It Shine. The book explored how individuals, families, and organizations could create environments where achievement was celebrated rather than resented, where people felt safe being their full selves without fear of judgment or retaliation. The book's success surprised everyone, including me. It spent 12 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list and was translated into 15 languages. Apparently, the struggle between visibility and authenticity was a global phenomenon, not limited to American family dynamics or corporate cultures. International speaking requests followed. In London, I addressed a room full of entrepreneurs who had built successful businesses, but were struggling with the social changes that accompanied wealth. In Tokyo, I spoke to women executives who were navigating traditional family expectations while pursuing modern career success. In Stockholm, I met with startup founders who were wrestling with how to maintain their values while scaling their companies. Each venue taught me something new about the universal nature of these challenges, while highlighting cultural differences in how they manifest. But the core struggle remained the same: how to be authentically yourself when success changes how others perceive and treat you. During a particularly memorable event in Sydney, an audience member asked, Do you ever regret not revealing your wealth to the Montgomerys from the beginning? Do you think you wasted 3 years of your life dealing with their condescension? The question made me pause and really consider whether I had any regrets about my approach. I don't regret the path I chose, I said finally. Those 3 years taught me invaluable lessons about character, both theirs and mine. If I had revealed my wealth immediately, I would never have known who they really were underneath their social polish. And I might never have developed the strength to stand up for myself when it truly mattered. That answer seemed to resonate with the audience, many of whom were nodding in recognition. We've all been in situations where we had to decide whether to reveal something about ourselves that might change how others treat us. The courage to make those revelations and to handle the consequences is something that has to be developed over time. My international speaking career also brought unexpected personal growth. James often traveled with me, and we discovered that working together professionally strengthened our marriage in ways we hadn't anticipated. He brought his financial expertise to help structure my speaking fees and book deals, while I helped him develop presentation skills that enhanced his own career. We became a true partnership in every sense, and I often credit our confrontation with his family as the catalyst that made this possible. By establishing equality from the beginning of our marriage, we avoided the power imbalances that can develop when one partner feels diminished or undervalued. 5 years after our wedding, James surprised me with something that brought our story full circle. He had been working secretly with a documentary filmmaker to create a follow-up piece about the long-term impact of our confrontation with his family. The film, titled Respect Earned: A Family's Transformation, featured interviews with Vivian, Charles, and even James's siblings about how the experience had changed their perspectives on class, worth, and family dynamics. Watching Vivian discuss her initial behavior was both cringeworthy and healing. She was unflinchingly honest about her prejudices and assumptions, acknowledging that she had been raised in a culture that equated financial status with personal worth. But she also talked about how much she had grown through knowing me, and how our confrontation had forced her to examine beliefs she had never questioned. Emma taught me that character can't be purchased. Vivian said in her interview, "I had spent my entire life in circles where money determined value, and I had never met someone who chose to hide their wealth rather than flaunt it. Her humility in success was something I had never encountered, and it challenged everything I thought I knew about worthiness." Charles was equally reflective, admitting that his initial dismissal of me had been based on superficial observations rather than any genuine assessment of my character or capabilities. I was so accustomed to dealing with people who led with their financial credentials that I didn't know how to evaluate someone who didn't, he explained. Emma's approach to wealth, treating it as a tool rather than an identity, was completely foreign to me, but ultimately much more impressive than anything I had encountered in my professional circles. A most surprising interview was with James's sister, Caroline, who revealed that she had been dealing with her own version of our struggle. Her husband came from a modest background, and she had watched her parents treat him with subtle condescension for years without speaking up. Our confrontation had given her the courage to have her own difficult conversation with Vivian and Charles about their behavior toward her spouse. Watching Emma stand up to Mom was terrifying and inspiring, Caroline said. I realized I had been enabling their behavior by staying silent when they made my husband feel less than welcome. Emma showed me that sometimes love requires confrontation, even when it's uncomfortable. James's brother Michael had a different perspective, but an equally valuable one. As the oldest son who had married within their social circle, he had never experienced family opposition to his relationship. But watching our situation unfold had opened his eyes to the privilege he had enjoyed and the character test he had never faced. "I don't know if I would have had Emma's courage," he admitted. "It's easy to conform when conforming gets you acceptance. It takes real strength to demand respect when you're being denied it. And Emma's example challenged me to think about where I might need to show more courage in my own life." A documentary premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and was later picked up by Netflix, where it found a global audience hungry for stories about family transformation and authentic relationships. The response was overwhelming, with viewers sharing their own stories of family conflicts resolved through honest confrontation. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. A year after the documentary's release, I received a letter from a young woman named Ashley, who's facing her own version of the Montgomery dilemma. Ashley had built a successful online business selling handmade jewelry, growing it from a college dorm room hobby into a 7-figure company. She was engaged to a man whose family owned a traditional manufacturing business and had been treating her like a crafty girl playing entrepreneur rather than a legitimate business owner. "Your story gave me the courage to invite them to my company's trade show booth," she wrote. "When they saw the scale of my operation, the international buyers placing orders, and the employees I had hired, their entire attitude shifted. But more importantly, I stopped caring whether it shifted or not. You taught me that my worth isn't up for negotiation." These letters became a regular part of my life, and I started setting aside time each week to respond personally to people sharing their stories. Many were dealing with family dynamics similar to ours, but others were facing workplace discrimination, social prejudice, or their own internal struggles with imposter syndrome. One letter that particularly moved me came from a man named David, who had grown up in foster care and built a successful construction company as an adult. He was engaged to a woman whose family kept making comments about his rough background and lack of proper upbringing. David had been considering ending the relationship rather than continuing to face their disapproval. "Your story helped me realize that their judgment says nothing about who I am and everything about who they are," he wrote. "I decided to invite them to visit one of my job sites and see what I had built. When they realized I employ over 100 people and have contracts with major developers, their tune changed. But like you said, I was already proud of who I was, regardless of their opinion." These connections with people facing similar challenges led to my third book, Letters to My Younger Self: Wisdom from Women Who Refused to Shrink. The book compiled stories from successful women who had faced moments when they had to choose between acceptance and authenticity, featuring their advice to others facing similar crossroads. The book became a phenomenon, particularly among young professional women who were navigating family expectations, workplace dynamics, and romantic relationships while building their careers. Book clubs formed around the country to discuss the stories and share their own experiences with choosing courage over comfort. One book club in Portland invited me to speak at their annual event, where over 500 women gathered to discuss the themes of authenticity, success, and family dynamics. During the Q&A session, a woman asked a question that had become increasingly common at my speaking events. "How do we teach our daughters to be proud of their achievements without becoming arrogant or losing their humility?" It was a question that struck at the heart of everything I had learned through my experience with the Montgomerys. "Pride in achievement and humility aren't opposites," I explained. "Humility is about understanding that success comes from a combination of hard work, opportunity, and sometimes luck. Pride is about acknowledging that you seized those opportunities and put in the work. You can be both proud of what you've accomplished and grateful for the circumstances that made it possible." I continued, "The key is teaching our daughters that their worth isn't determined by external validation, whether positive or negative. The Montgomerys' initial condescension didn't diminish my value, and their later respect didn't increase it. I was the same person throughout. They just changed their perception based on new information." This philosophy became central to the mentorship program James and I established through our foundation. We began working with young entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds, helping them navigate the challenges that come with building successful businesses while maintaining their authentic selves. The program paired emerging entrepreneurs with established business leaders who had faced similar struggles with visibility, family dynamics, or social expectations, The results were remarkable. Participants reported higher confidence levels, stronger family relationships, and more sustainable business practices. One of our most successful mentees was a young woman named Priya who had immigrated from India with her family and built a successful app development company while her parents wanted her to pursue medicine. The cultural and generational conflicts she faced were complex, but through the mentorship program, she learned to honor her parents' dreams while pursuing her own path. Emma taught me that respect is earned through consistency and results, not through conforming to others' expectations, Priya explained at our program's first graduation ceremony. I didn't have to choose between honoring my heritage and building my business. I could do both by staying true to my values while pursuing my vision. 7 years after confronting the Montgomerys at that pivotal lunch, I found myself back at the same hotel restaurant, this time hosting a celebration. My hotel chain had been acquired by an international hospitality group for a sum that made headlines in the business press. James and I were toasting not just the financial success, but the journey that had brought us to this moment. Vivian and Charles were there, beaming with pride as they raised their glasses to toast my achievement. The contrast with that first hostile lunch was almost surreal, but what struck me most wasn't how much they had changed. It was how much I had grown in confidence and self-assurance. The woman who had sat in this same room 7 years earlier, hurt and defensive about the family's condescension, had evolved into someone who could receive both criticism and praise with equal equanimity. My worth was no longer tied to others' perceptions, whether negative or positive. During the celebration, a young server approached our table nervously. She had recognized me from my speaking events and wanted to share that she was starting her own catering business while working at the hotel to gain experience. Her story reminded me so much of my own journey, someone building something significant while others saw only the surface. I gave her my business card and invited her to apply for our mentorship program. Later, I learned that her catering business grew into a successful restaurant chain, and she credited that moment of encouragement as a turning point in her confidence as an entrepreneur. These chance encounters happened regularly now, reminding me that success carries the responsibility to lift others as you climb. The platform I had built through my books and speaking career wasn't just about sharing my story. It was about creating space for others to share theirs and find their own courage to demand respect. As the evening wound down, James pulled me aside to the hotel's balcony overlooking the city lights. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had handled things differently with my parents?" he asked. I considered the question seriously. If I had revealed my wealth immediately, we might have had an easier path to family acceptance. But we would have missed out on all the growth that came from working through the conflict. Your parents wouldn't have examined their prejudices. We wouldn't have developed the skills to handle family pressure, and I might never have found my voice as an advocate for authentic relationships. He nodded, understanding what I meant. Plus, we never would have discovered how much we could accomplish as a team when we're both operating from our full strength. That partnership had become the foundation not just of our marriage, but of everything we had built together. The hotels, the books, the speaking career, the foundation work, all of it had grown from the seeds planted during those difficult days when we chose to confront rather than avoid, to reveal rather than hide, to demand rather than accept. Looking back now, I can see that the confrontation with Vivian wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning. It was the moment when I stopped allowing others to define my worth and started insisting on the respect I deserved. That shift in mindset opened doors I hadn't even known existed and led to opportunities I could never have imagined. The most recent opportunity came just last month when I was invited to give the keynote address at the Global Women's Leadership Summit in Geneva. Standing on that stage, looking out at 3,000 women from around the world, I thought about the journey that had brought me there. It started with a cruel lunch conversation designed to make me feel small and ended with a global platform to help others feel strong. Every rejection, every moment of condescension, Every challenge to my worth had contributed to building the resilience and perspective that now allowed me to inspire others. During that keynote, I shared something I had never said publicly before. The people who try to diminish you aren't your enemies, they're your teachers. They show you exactly what you're capable of overcoming, and they give you the opportunity to prove to yourself that your worth is not negotiable. The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for my words. It was for the recognition that we all face moments when we must choose between shrinking to fit others' expectations or expanding to meet our own potential. My story had given others permission to choose expansion. After the summit, I was approached by representatives from the United Nations Women's Division about developing a global mentorship program for women entrepreneurs facing family and cultural barriers to success. The program would connect successful businesswomen with emerging entrepreneurs across different countries and cultures, sharing strategies for navigating family dynamics while building sustainable businesses. As I write this, that program is in development, with pilot programs launching in 12 countries next year. What began as my personal struggle with the Montgomery family has evolved into a global movement supporting women who refuse to be diminished by others' limitations. But beyond all the professional success and public recognition, the most important outcome has been the relationship James and I have built. We've created a marriage where both partners feel free to be their complete, authentic selves, where success is celebrated rather than hidden, where challenges are faced together, and where respect is never conditional. The Montgomery family has become not just accepting, but genuinely supportive. Vivian often introduces me as the daughter-in-law who taught our family what real strength looks like. Charles has become one of my most effective referral sources for speaking engagements, connecting me with business leaders who want to address similar dynamics in their organizations. Most importantly, they've become grandparents who will raise the next generation with different values. When James and I welcomed our daughter Emma Rose last year, named after both her mother and her paternal great-grandmother, Vivian was the first to say, she's going to be raised to know her worth isn't dependent on anyone else's approval. That little girl will grow up in a family where success is celebrated, authenticity is valued, and respect is considered a basic right, not a privilege to be earned through conformity. She'll never have to choose between hiding who she is and demanding the treatment she deserves. As I finish writing this story, Emma Rose is sleeping peacefully in her nursery, surrounded by books about strong women and pictures of family members who learn to love without conditions. Her future will include its own challenges, but she'll face them with the knowledge that her worth is inherent, not dependent on others' recognition. The journey from that humiliating lunch with Vivian to this moment of complete family harmony and professional fulfillment has taught me that our most painful experiences often become our greatest strengths. The condescension that once hurt so deeply became the foundation for a life dedicated to helping others find their own voices and demand their own respect. If you stayed with me through this entire journey, thank you for being part of a community that believes in the power of authenticity and the importance of never accepting treatment that diminishes your worth. Your engagement with these stories creates ripple effects that reach far beyond what we can see. I want to hear from you about your own experiences with family dynamics and success. Have you ever hidden your achievements to avoid changing relationships? How did that work out for you? Did you eventually reveal your true capabilities? And if so, what was the reaction? What's your opinion on my decision to keep my wealth secret from James and his family for so long? Do you think it was fair to James, or was I protecting both of us from premature judgments? Would you have made the same choice, or would you have been more upfront from the beginning? Here's a question I'm really curious about. Do you believe the Montgomery family's transformation was genuine, or do you think they were just adapting to new circumstances? In your experience, can people really change their fundamental attitudes about class and worth, or do they just get better at hiding their prejudices? And finally, what would you have said to Vivian during that lunch conversation? Would you have revealed your wealth immediately like I did, or would you have taken a different approach? Share your thoughts. I love reading different perspectives on how to handle these challenging situations. If this story has inspired you to stand up for yourself and your own family dynamics, please hit that like button to let me know. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss new stories about people who chose courage over comfort and authenticity over acceptance. Share this video with someone who might need encouragement to reveal their own hidden strengths or demand the respect they deserve. Your shares help these stories reach people who are facing their own Montgomery family moments and need to know they're not alone. Most importantly, remember that your worth is not subject to other people's approval. You don't need permission to be successful, and you don't need to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be less than you are, regardless of who's trying to convince you otherwise. The community we've built around these stories is proof that when we share our experiences of choosing strength over accommodation, we give others permission to do the same. Together, we're changing the narrative around success, family dynamics, and self-worth, one story at a time. The ripple effects of our story continued to expand in ways I never could have predicted. 3 years after the documentary's release, I was contacted by researchers at Stanford University who wanted to study the psychological and social dynamics of wealth revelation moments, situations where hidden financial success becomes a catalyst for relationship transformation. The research project followed 50 families over 2 years, documenting how revelations about hidden wealth affected family dynamics, marriage outcomes, and social relationships. Our story had become a case study in successful navigation of these complex situations, and the researchers wanted to understand what factors contributed to positive versus negative outcomes. The study's findings were fascinating. Families where wealth revelation led to stronger relationships shared several characteristics. The wealthy individual had clear personal values that weren't tied to money. They approached the revelation as an opportunity for deeper honesty rather than a weapon, and they were prepared to maintain boundaries regardless of family reactions. Conversely, families where wealth revelation created lasting damage typically involved individuals who used their financial status to control or manipulate others, or families who completely changed their treatment based solely on money rather than reassessing their previous judgments. Dr. Patricia Williams, the lead researcher, invited me to co-author a paper on the findings. "Your approach to the revelation was textbook perfect," she explained. "You revealed your wealth not to intimidate or control, but to demand equal treatment. That distinction made all the difference in the outcome." The academic paper was published in the Journal of Family Psychology and sparked additional research into the phenomenon of strategic financial privacy, the conscious decision to hide wealth to test relationship authenticity. Universities began incorporating these findings into their family therapy and business psychology curricula. I started receiving invitations to speak at academic conferences, adding a scholarly dimension to my already busy speaking schedule. At a conference on family systems at Yale, I met Dr. Maria Santos, a family therapist who had been using our story as a case study with clients facing similar dynamics. "Your experience illustrates perfectly how family roles can be renegotiated when power dynamics shift," she explained. "The key was that you didn't just reveal your wealth. You used it as a foundation to demand healthier relationship patterns." This therapeutic perspective added depth to my understanding of what had happened with the Montgomerys. It wasn't just about money or respect. It was about establishing healthy boundaries and authentic communication patterns that would serve our family for generations. Dr. Santos invited me to collaborate on a workshop series for family therapists dealing with wealth-related conflicts. These workshops, titled Money, Power, and Family Dynamics, became so popular that we expanded them internationally, training therapists in 15 countries to help families navigate the complex emotions that surround financial success and family hierarchies. During one workshop in London, a therapist shared a case that perfectly illustrated our concepts. She was working with a family where the youngest daughter had built a successful fashion brand but was hiding it from her siblings because she feared their resentment. The family dynamic was deteriorating as the daughter made excuses for her absences from family events. She was actually attending international fashion shows. And her ability to afford things they couldn't understand, funded by her business success. Your framework helped me guide her toward strategic revelation, the therapist explained. Instead of a dramatic confrontation, she gradually shared her success in contexts where her siblings could see how her achievements reflected positively on the entire family. The result was pride rather than resentment, and stronger family bonds rather than broken ones. These stories reinforced my belief that the how of revelation matters as much as the when and why. The approach we take to sharing our success can either build bridges or burn them, depending on whether we lead with ego or with love. This understanding became crucial when James and I faced our own next challenge. When Emma Rose turned 3, Vivian began pressuring us to enroll her in an exclusive private school in Boston, arguing that the family tradition required Montgomery children to attend certain institutions. This time, our response was immediate and united. We explained that Emma Rose would attend excellent schools in Denver, where she could grow up knowing children from diverse backgrounds rather than only those from similar privileged circumstances. We wanted her to develop empathy and understanding for people from all walks of life, not the entitled perspective that had initially characterized the Montgomery family approach to class differences. Vivian's reaction surprised me. Instead of the argument I expected, she paused thoughtfully and then said, "You know, you're absolutely right. Some of my worst qualities developed because I was never exposed to people who challenged my assumptions. Emma Rose will be stronger for growing up differently." Charles agreed, adding, "The business world is changing rapidly. Emma Rose will need to understand and connect with people from all backgrounds to be successful. An insular education would actually be a disadvantage." This conversation marked another evolution in our family dynamic. The Montgomerys weren't just accepting our choices. They were recognizing the wisdom behind them. The family that had once tried to force conformity was now embracing the value of different perspectives. Our decision about Emma Rose's education led to deeper discussions about values and legacy that continued for months. What did we want to pass down to the next generation? How could we honor family traditions while adapting them for a changing world? What lessons from our own experiences should guide how we raise our daughter? These conversations resulted in a family mission statement that all of us, James, myself, Vivian, and Charles, collaborated on. It emphasized character over status, contribution over consumption, and authentic relationships over superficial connections. Most importantly, it included a commitment to welcome and respect family members regardless of their background, financial status, or non-traditional approaches to life. We had the mission statement professionally framed and hung it in both our Denver home and the Boston family estate. It serves as a daily reminder of the growth that can come from confronting difficult truths and choosing love over control. The mission statement caught the attention of other wealthy families struggling with similar dynamics. Word spread through their social networks, and I began receiving requests from family patriarchs and matriarchs who want to help addressing generational conflicts around money, marriage choices, and changing social values. This led to my 4th book, Family Fortunes: Transforming Wealth from Weapon to Wisdom. The book explored how families could use their financial advantages to build stronger relationships rather than create hierarchies and resentment. It featured case studies from families who had successfully navigated these challenges, along with practical frameworks for others facing similar situations. One particularly powerful story in the book came from the Willington family in Philadelphia, who had initially disowned their son when he married a woman from a working-class background. Inspired by our experience, they had reached out to the daughter-in-law they had rejected, learned about her remarkable work as a social worker transforming inner-city communities, and completely rebuilt their relationship based on her character and contributions rather than her family's income level. Emma's story showed us that we had been measuring worth with the wrong metric, the Wellington patriarch explained in his interview. We thought we were protecting our family legacy, but we were actually undermining it by rejecting someone whose values aligned perfectly with our stated principles. The book's success led to a consulting practice focused specifically on helping wealthy families develop healthier approaches to money, relationships, and generational transitions. Working with these families was both challenging and rewarding, as it required people to examine deeply held beliefs about class, worth, and family loyalty. One of my most complex cases involved the Harrison family from Dallas, where 3 generations were locked in conflict over the youngest daughter's decision to become a public school teacher, despite inheriting millions from the family oil business. The older generations saw her career choice as a rejection of family values, while she saw their reaction as proof that they valued money over service. It took 6 months of family sessions to help them understand that her choice to teach wasn't a rejection of the family wealth, but a different expression of the same values that had built that wealth: hard work, dedication, and making a positive impact. The resolution came when they established a family foundation focused on educational equity, allowing her to pursue her teaching passion while leveraging family resources to create systemic change. These consulting experiences taught me that family wealth conflicts rarely are really about money. They're about power, control, identity, and love. The families that successfully resolve these conflicts are those willing to examine their motivations and choose relationship health over traditional hierarchies. My work with family dynamics caught the attention of estate planning attorneys who were seeing increasing numbers of inheritance conflicts related to changing family structures and values. They invited me to develop workshops for their clients on wealth transition with relationship preservation. These workshops addressed practical questions. How do you pass down wealth without creating dependency? How do you maintain family unity when children choose dramatically different lifestyles? How do you honor family traditions while allowing room for individual authenticity? The workshops were so successful that we created an online course that reached families globally. To date, over 5,000 families have participated, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. Participants report stronger family relationships, clearer communication about money and expectations, and more successful transitions of wealth between generations. 10 years after confronting Vivian at that life-changing lunch, I was invited to give the commencement address at my alma mater, the University of Colorado. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of graduates, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 10 years ago, I told the graduates, I was sitting in a restaurant being told by my future mother-in-law that I wasn't worthy of joining her family. Today, that same woman introduces me as the daughter-in-law who taught their family what real strength looks like. The difference wasn't what I achieved in those 10 years. It was my willingness to stand up for who I already was. The speech, titled "The Courage to Be Seen," went viral on social media and became one of the most watched commencement addresses of that year. Universities across the country began requesting similar speeches, and I found myself with a platform to influence thousands of young people at the start of their careers. During a Q&A session at UCLA, a student asked, "How do you balance humility with self-advocacy? How do you stand up for yourself without becoming arrogant?" It was a question that went to the heart of everything I had learned. Humility isn't about making yourself smaller, I explained. It's about accurate self-assessment. True humility means acknowledging both your strengths and your areas for growth. Arrogance comes from overestimating your abilities or importance. Self-advocacy comes from accurate assessment and refusing to accept treatment that doesn't align with your actual worth. Another student asked, "Why standing up for yourself damages relationships you care about? How do you know when it's worth the risk?" "Relationships that require you to diminish yourself aren't worth preserving in their current form," I replied. "The risk isn't in standing up for yourself. It's in spending your life pretending to be less than you are. That path leads to resentment, lost opportunities, and relationships built on false foundations. These university speaking engagements led to the development of a curriculum I never expected to create, a course on authentic leadership in complex family systems that is now taught at business schools across the country. The course uses our story and others like it to help future business leaders understand how family dynamics can impact professional success and personal fulfillment. Students in the program work through case studies of real families, with permission, who have navigated wealth, success, and relationship challenges. They develop skills in boundary setting, honest communication, and value-based decision-making that serve them both personally and professionally. One student from the program, Jennifer Kim, wrote her thesis on the hidden cost of hiding success, and went on to found a nonprofit that helps first-generation wealth builders navigate family relationships as their financial circumstances change. Her organization has helped hundreds of people develop strategies for sharing their success in ways that strengthen rather than strain family bonds. The success of the university program led to corporate training opportunities with companies whose employees were struggling with similar dynamics in their professional lives. Many high-achieving employees were downplaying their successes to avoid triggering resentment from colleagues or supervisors, creating workplace cultures where excellence was hidden rather than celebrated. Working with these companies required developing frameworks for creating psychologically safe environments where success could be visible and celebrated without creating toxic competition or resentment. The solutions often involve changing not just individual behaviors, but entire organizational cultures around recognition, advancement, and team dynamics. One particularly successful intervention was with a tech startup where several employees had been hiding significant side projects and personal achievements because they feared being seen as disloyal or distracted from company goals. Through workshops based on our story, the company learned to celebrate employees' external successes as evidence of their talent and capability, rather than threats to company commitment. The results included higher employee satisfaction, increased innovation as people felt free to share diverse experiences and perspectives, and stronger company performance as hidden talents became visible and could be leveraged for business advantage. These corporate successes led to consulting opportunities with venture capital firms and private equity companies who wanted to understand how family dynamics and hidden wealth affected their portfolio companies. Many entrepreneurs were struggling with family relationships as their businesses grew successful, and these struggles were impacting their ability to scale effectively. I developed assessment tools to help investors identify when entrepreneurs might be dealing with family conflicts related to their success, and created intervention strategies to address these issues before they impacted business performance. The approach was so effective that it became standard practice at several major investment firms. 15 years after that pivotal confrontation with Vivian, I found myself back in the same hotel restaurant in Denver, this time hosting a very different kind of gathering. Emma Rose, now a confident 12-year-old, was celebrating her acceptance into a prestigious summer program for young entrepreneurs, something she had applied for and earned entirely on her own merit. The celebration included not just our immediate family, but also several of the young people who had been part of our mentorship programs over the years. Watching Emma Rose interact with these successful young adults who had overcome various forms of family and social obstacles to build their own achievements filled me with pride and hope for the future. During the dinner, Emma Rose stood up to make an impromptu speech that brought tears to my eyes. I want to thank my mom for teaching me that being successful isn't something to hide from or apologize for, she said with the confidence that comes from growing up knowing your worth. And I want to thank my grandmother Vivian for showing me that people can change and grow, even when they start from the wrong place. Vivian, now 78 and softer around the edges but still formidable in her own way, wiped away tears as she responded. Emma Rose, you represent everything good about the Montgomery family legacy, not because of money or status, but because of character. Your mother taught us all what real strength looks like. The evening reminded me that transformation is possible at any age and in any circumstance. The woman who had once tried to convince me I wasn't worthy of her son was now my strongest supporter and Emma Rose's most devoted grandmother. The family that had initially represented everything I wanted to avoid had become my chosen family in the truest sense. But perhaps the most meaningful moment of the evening came when one of our mentorship program graduates, a young man named Marcus, who had built a successful nonprofit while facing family pressure to pursue more lucrative work, pulled me aside to share some news. "I'm getting married next month," he said, "and my fiancé's family has been giving us some pushback about my unstable nonprofit career. I was getting discouraged until I remembered your story. Tomorrow, I'm taking them to our annual gala, where they'll see the impact we've made and the supporters we've gained. If they still think nonprofit work isn't impressive after that, then I'll know where I stand with them." His confidence and clarity reminded me of my younger self preparing for that confrontation with the Montgomerys. But Marcus had advantages I hadn't: a community of people who had walked similar paths, frameworks for understanding family dynamics, and the knowledge that he wasn't alone in facing these challenges. 6 months later, Marcus sent me a photo from his wedding, where his new in-laws were proudly introducing him as our son-in-law who runs the nonprofit that's transforming education in underserved communities. The parallel to my own experience was striking, but his journey had been smoother because he'd learned from the experiences of others who had gone before. This pattern of paying it forward had become one of the most rewarding aspects of sharing our story publicly. Each person who found courage through our experience went on to inspire others, creating an expanding network of people who refused to be diminished by others' limitations. The network grew so large that we formalized it into an organization called Authentic Success Alliance, a global community of entrepreneurs, professionals, and individuals who had faced moments when they had to choose between hiding their achievements and demanding respect for their authentic selves. The Alliance now hosts annual conferences in major cities worldwide, bringing together people from diverse backgrounds who share the common experience of having their worth questioned and their dignity challenged. These events aren't just networking opportunities. They're healing spaces where people can share their stories and find validation for their experiences. Last year's conference in New York attracted over 2,000 attendees from 40 countries. The keynote panel featured 6 speakers who had all faced different versions of the same challenge. A tech entrepreneur who had hidden her Stanford PhD from her blue-collar family to avoid making them feel inadequate. A successful artist whose wealthy in-laws had dismissed his work as hobby painting until a gallery exhibition revealed his 7-figure sales. A medical researcher whose own family had mocked her playing with test tubes until her AIDS research breakthrough saved thousands of lives. Each story was unique, but the themes were universal. The pain of being underestimated, the courage required to reveal your true self, and the transformation that becomes possible when authentic relationships replace performative ones. The most powerful moment of the conference came during a panel I moderated on family transformation stories. Vivian had agreed to participate via video call from Boston, sharing her perspective on how our confrontation had changed not just her relationship with me, but her entire approach to evaluating people's worth. I was raised in a culture that equated financial status with personal value, she told the audience. It took Emma's courage to confront me with my own prejudices to realize how much I was missing. Now, I measure people by their character, their contributions, and their kindness. My life is richer for this change, and my family is stronger. The audience gave her a standing ovation, recognition of how difficult it can be to acknowledge past mistakes and change fundamental worldviews. Vivian's willingness to share her transformation publicly had become another form of inspiration for families struggling with similar dynamics. After the conference, I was approached by a documentary filmmaker who wanted to create a follow-up piece about the global community that had grown from our story. Hidden Fortunes had documented one family's transformation, but this new project would explore how individual acts of courage can create movements for change. The new documentary, Ripple Effects: How One Story Changed Thousands of Lives, spent 2 years following alliance members around the world. It featured families in Japan dealing with traditional expectations versus modern career choices, entrepreneurs in Nigeria navigating tribal wealth hierarchies, and business leaders in Germany addressing generational conflicts around inherited versus earned wealth. The global scope of the film revealed how universal these challenges are, while highlighting cultural differences in how they manifest. But in every culture, the solution involved the same core elements: honest communication, mutual respect, and the courage to stand firm on fundamental values while remaining open to growth and change. The documentary premiered at Cannes and was later distributed on streaming platforms worldwide. The response was overwhelming, with viewers organizing local alliance chapters in cities where none had previously existed. What had begun as my personal confrontation with dismissive in-laws had evolved into a global movement, supporting authentic relationships and respectful family dynamics. During the film's premiere, James and I were interviewed by international media about the unexpected journey our story had taken. "Did you ever imagine that standing up to my mother would lead to all this?" one reporter asked. "Never in my wildest dreams," I admitted. "But that's the power of authenticity. It resonates with people because everyone has faced moments when they had to choose between being accepted for who they're not or respected for who they are." James added, "The most beautiful part is seeing how Emma's courage has given others permission to find their own. Every person who chooses authenticity over accommodation creates space for someone else to do the same." As we approach our 15th wedding anniversary, I often reflect on how far we've all traveled from that hostile lunch where Vivian tried to convince me I wasn't worthy of her son. The woman who once saw me as a threat to family status now considers me one of her closest confidants. The family that initially represented everything I wanted to avoid has become the foundation for everything I've built. But the most profound change has been in myself. The woman who once hid her success out of fear of judgment has become someone who helps others find their voices and demand their worth. The painful experience of being dismissed and condescended to has become the source of strength I draw on to help others face their own moments of truth. Emma Rose is growing up in a world where she sees her mother celebrated for her achievements, her father supporting those achievements as an equal partner, and her grandparents genuinely proud of the family they've become. She's learning that success is something to be grateful for and generous with, not something to hide or weaponize. Recently, she asked me why I had kept my business success secret from Grandma Vivian for so long. It was a complicated question to answer for a 12-year-old, but I tried to explain it in terms she could understand. Sometimes people treat you differently when they know you have something they want or respect, I told her. I wanted to know if Grandma Vivian would be kind to me because of who I was as a person, not because of what I owned. It turned out she wasn't kind at first, but that taught both of us something important about what really matters. Emma Rose considered this carefully before responding. "So you tested her character, and when she failed, you gave her a chance to try again?" The wisdom in her simple summary took my breath away. Exactly, and she chose to grow and change instead of staying stuck in her old ways. "That was brave of both of you," Emma Rose said matter-of-factly. "You for standing up to her, and her for admitting she was wrong." From the mouths of babes, my daughter had understood something that many adults struggle with. Courage isn't just about confronting others, it's also about examining yourself and choosing growth over comfort. This conversation with Emma Rose inspired my 5th and most personal book, Lessons for My Daughter, What I Learned from Standing Up for Myself. Written as a series of letters to Emma Rose, the book explored the various challenges she might face as she grows up wealthy, successful, and strong. along with the wisdom I hope to pass down about navigating relationships, family dynamics, and self-worth. The book's publication coincided with Emma Rose's 13th birthday, and we held a joint celebration and book launch at our flagship hotel in Denver. The guest list included Alliance members, family friends, business colleagues, and even some of the university students who had been inspired by our story to pursue their own entrepreneurial dreams. During the celebration, Vivian presented Emma Rose with a gift that moved everyone present: a leather-bound journal with an inscription that read, "For a young woman who will never need to hide her light to make others comfortable, may you always know your worth and never be afraid to shine." It was a far cry from the grandmother who had once tried to dim my light to protect her own sense of superiority. The transformation was complete, authentic, and permanent. As the evening wound down, I found myself standing on the hotel's rooftop terrace overlooking the Denver skyline. The city lights stretched out below, each one representing a dream, a struggle, a story of someone building something meaningful. 15 years ago, I had been one of those lights, working quietly to build something significant, while others underestimated my potential. Now I was part of a constellation of lights, all the people whose stories had intersected with mine, who had found courage through our example, who had chosen authenticity over accommodation and respect over acceptance. Together, we were changing the narrative around success, family, and self-worth. James joined me on the terrace, wrapping his arms around me, as we looked out at the city we had chosen as our home. "Any regrets?" he asked, a question that had become something of a tradition on significant anniversaries. "Only that it took a family crisis to teach us how strong we could be together," I replied. "But maybe that's how growth works. Through challenge rather than comfort." He kissed my temple gently. "Well, then here's to the challenges that made us who we are and the people who believed we could become even better." As I stood there, surrounded by family and friends who had all grown through various forms of adversity, I realized that the most important lesson from our story wasn't about wealth or family dynamics. It was about the compound effect of choosing courage consistently over time. One moment of standing up to Vivian had led to a stronger marriage, which led to business success, which led to platform building, which led to helping others, which led to global impact, which led to family transformation that would influence generations. None of it would have been possible if I had chosen the easier path of signing that original prenup and accepting diminished treatment. The compound effect works both ways, though. Small compromises with your dignity compound into a life of diminished self-worth. Small acts of courage compound into a life of authentic power and genuine respect. All right, my incredible community, we've reached the end of this extended journey together, and I'm overwhelmed by the support you've shown throughout this entire story. If you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who believes in the power of standing up for yourself and demanding the respect you deserve. I have so many questions for you, and I genuinely want to hear your thoughts and experiences. First, what was the moment in this story that resonated most with you? Was it the initial confrontation with Vivian? The revelation of Emma's wealth? The family's transformation? Or perhaps the long-term impact and global community that developed? You're something I'm really curious about. Do you think Emma waited too long to reveal her financial situation? Should she have told James about her wealth earlier in their relationship, or was her approach of waiting and observing the right strategy? What would you have done in her position? And what about the Montgomery family's transformation? Do you believe it was genuine? Or do you think they were just adapting their behavior to new circumstances? In your own life, have you seen people truly change their core beliefs about class and worth? Or do they typically just get better at hiding their prejudices? I want to hear about your own experiences too. Have you ever been underestimated by someone's family because of your background, appearance, or perceived financial status? How did you handle it? Did you confront them directly like Emma did? Or did you choose a different strategy? What was the outcome? On the flip side, have you ever caught yourself making assumptions about someone based on superficial observations? What helped you recognize and change those biases? We all have blind spots, and part of growing is acknowledging them honestly. Here's a question that many viewers have asked. What would you have said to Vivian during that crucial lunch conversation? Would you have revealed your wealth immediately like Emma did, taken a more gradual approach, or responded in a completely different way? I love hearing different perspectives on how to handle these challenging family situations. And finally, what's your take on hiding success versus being transparent about achievements? Do you think there are situations where strategic privacy about your accomplishments is wise? Or should we always be open about our successes? Have you ever hidden your own achievements to avoid changing relationships or creating complications? Your answers to these questions help shape future content and create a dialogue that benefits everyone in our community. I read every comment and often feature the most insightful responses in upcoming videos. So don't hesitate to share your honest thoughts and experiences. If this extended story has inspired you, motivated you, or taught you something valuable, please show your support by smashing that like button. It takes just 1 second, but helps this content reach more people who might need to hear Emma's message of courage and self-respect. Subscribe to join our growing community of people who refuse to be underestimated, and ring that notification bell so you never miss new stories of triumph, transformation, and authentic living. We're building something special here, a space where people support each other's journey toward genuine self-respect and healthy relationships. Share this video with someone in your life who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves, reveal their hidden strengths, or demand better treatment from family members or colleagues. Your shares are how these stories reach people at exactly the moment they need to hear them. And if you want to dive even deeper into these topics, check out the playlist I've created featuring similar stories of people who chose courage over comfort and authenticity over acceptance. Each story offers different lessons and perspectives on navigating family dynamics, workplace challenges, and personal growth. Thank you for being part of this incredible community and for supporting content that celebrates strength, authenticity, and the refusal to be diminished by others' limitations. Together, we're proving that everyone deserves respect, that families can change and grow, and that individual acts of courage can create ripple effects that change the world. Remember, you are worthy of respect exactly as you are. Your success is nothing to apologize for, and you never have to make yourself smaller to make others comfortable. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be less than who you truly are, no matter who's trying to convince you otherwise. Until next time, keep standing up for yourselves, keep demanding the respect you deserve, and keep inspiring others through your own courage and authenticity. You never know whose life might be changed by watching you choose strength over accommodation. James and I were invited to speak at a conference about modern relationships and family dynamics. During our presentation, James said something that perfectly captured what we had learned. Love isn't diminished by wealth, but respect must never be conditional on it. When families make financial status the measure of worthiness, they rob themselves of the opportunity to know remarkable people. The conference organizers told us it was one of their most popular sessions ever, with attendees requesting additional workshops on navigating family money dynamics and maintaining personal integrity in the face of social pressure. 6 months after our wedding, Vivian called me directly for the first time. "Emma," she said, her voice tentative, "I've been doing a lot of thinking about our first interactions, and I realize I owe you more than an apology. I owe you gratitude." That surprised me. Gratitude for what? For teaching me that character isn't measured in bank statements or family trees? My behavior was inexcusable, but your response was extraordinary. You could have humiliated me publicly or held a grudge indefinitely. Instead, you gave our family the opportunity to grow and change. It was perhaps the most genuine conversation we'd ever had. We all have room to grow, Mrs. Montgomery. What matters is that we learn from our mistakes. Please, she said, call me Vivian. And Emma, thank you for making my son so happy. His joy is evident every time he talks about you and your life together. Charles, too, showed his evolution in meaningful ways. when I decided to write a book about my experience building wealth as a young entrepreneur, he not only endorsed it, but connected me with his publisher. The book, titled Hidden Assets: Building Wealth Without Losing Yourself, became a bestseller and led to speaking opportunities across the country. During the book tour, James accompanied me to several events, and I watched him beam with pride as I shared our story and the lessons we'd learned about love, respect, and staying true to yourself, regardless of external pressures. He often said that my courage in confronting his family had inspired him to be more authentic in all areas of his life. The ripple effects continued to spread. My parents, initially worried that revealing my wealth might change me, were amazed to see how it actually freed me to be more generous and impactful. We established a scholarship fund for first-generation college students studying hospitality management, ensuring that other young people from modest backgrounds would have opportunities to pursue their dreams. The Montgomery Family Foundation, impressed by our scholarship program's success, partnered with us to expand it nationwide. What had begun as a conflict over worthiness became a collaboration that has now helped over 500 students access higher education. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came 2 years after our wedding, when Vivian was hosting a charity luncheon and introduced me to her society friends. "This is my daughter-in-law, Emma Montgomery," she said with unmistakable pride. "She's built one of the most successful boutique hotel chains in the country and is the author of a best-selling business book. We're so fortunate to have her in our family." The woman she was speaking to looked impressed. "How wonderful! Did she inherit the business?" "Oh no," Vivian replied, her smile genuine. "Emma built it herself from the ground up. She's quite remarkable, the kind of woman who sees an opportunity and creates something extraordinary. The Montgomery family is lucky to have such an accomplished addition." Hearing Vivian speak about me with such respect and admiration felt like complete vindication. Not because I needed her approval, but because it proved that people can change when confronted with their own prejudices. James squeezed my hand during Vivian's introduction, and I saw in his eyes the same pride I felt. We had navigated one of the most challenging tests a relationship can face: family opposition based on false assumptions. Ed emerged stronger. The final chapter of this story is still being written. James and I are now planning to expand internationally, with our first European hotel opening in London next year. Charles has offered to help with the financial structuring, and Vivian has volunteered to host a launch party in Boston to introduce us to potential East Coast investors. What began as a clash over social worthiness has evolved into a true family partnership, built on mutual respect and shared goals. The Montgomerys learned that character can't be measured by bank statements or family history. I learned that sometimes you have to reveal your full truth to get the respect you deserve. But the most important lesson was this: never allow anyone to make you feel less than you are, regardless of their wealth, status, or social position. Your worth isn't determined by other people's perceptions, and sometimes the most powerful response to condescension is simply refusing to accept it. 3 years later, I still get messages from people who heard our story and found the courage to stand up for themselves in similar situations. Each one reminds me that individual acts of self-respect can inspire others to demand the same for themselves. Looking back, I'm grateful for Vivian's initial cruelty, because it forced a confrontation that needed to happen. Without it, I might have spent years being subtly undermined and disrespected, slowly eroding my own sense of worth. Instead, that painful lunch conversation became the catalyst for authentic relationships built on truth and mutual respect. The grandmother who left me that life-changing inheritance always told me, "Money isn't about what you can buy, sweetheart. It's about the choices it gives you and the courage to make the right ones." I think she would have been proud of how I chose to use both the money and the courage she helped me develop. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for taking this journey with me. Your support means everything, And I hope Emma's experience has inspired you to stand up for yourself when faced with people who try to diminish your worth. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where someone underestimated you based on appearances? How did you handle it? Did you reveal your true capabilities, or did you choose a different path? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one and often feature the best responses in future videos. What would you have done in Emma's shoes when Vivian suggested she wasn't worthy of James? Would you have revealed your wealth immediately, or would you have chosen a different strategy? Let me know your thoughts. And here's a question that many of you have asked. Do you think Emma was wrong to keep her financial situation secret for so long? Was it fair to James, or was she protecting herself from exactly the kind of judgment she eventually faced? I'm curious about your perspectives on this. Finally, what's your take on the Montgomery family's transformation? Do you believe people can genuinely change their attitudes about class and wealth? Or do you think they were just adapting to new circumstances? Have you seen similar changes in your own family dynamics? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps more people discover these tales of triumph over prejudice. Subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story about people who refused to be underestimated. Share this video with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves or reveal their own hidden strengths. Your engagement with these stories creates a community of people supporting each other's journey towards self-respect and authentic relationships. Together, we're proving that everyone deserves to be valued for who they truly are, not who others assume them to be. Thank you for being part of this community, and remember, your worth is not up for debate, and you never have to accept being treated as less than you are. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be diminished, no matter who's trying to make you smaller.